looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Scotty Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Tuesday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. I had to look again. What day is it, I asked myself. It's Tuesday, the 29th of June. One more day of the month of June, and we're already pushing into midsummer. And so, at least by our calendar. And so I want to welcome you to the show tonight. And you're listening via OdysseyRadio.com. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over and see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio. Well, you know what? Tonight's show, you'll only hear an archive over at Odyssey because he's playing through some of the 500 shows we have archived over there now until we get set up to go live there as well as here on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It's kind of an empty house here tonight. Rainey is off with two of the kids, and the other kid went off to some activities with some friends and just walked in the door. And so it's now it's just me and one young'un here tonight, which hopefully will not come in and interrupt the show tonight. I like it when my wife interrupts, and it's okay when my family interrupts. That's part of what this show is all about. But sometimes I just like to have a show, and we just do it. And last night, sorry once again for my earlier than normal departure. Not only was I highly distracted by my wonderful wife, I was also losing the voice, which is still not back up to par today. It's going to be a little bit, so you're going to have to bear with me for a little while. It's slightly better than last night, and it will remain slightly better tonight if I use it properly tonight. And so welcome to the show. You can see right here down below this window on YouTube, you can see the join button. Hit the join button. You can find out the 3 different ways you can become a member and support this channel. That supports my work here, my research. It supports sustaining this channel in ways that are outside of even YouTube. And so I appreciate it. And there's 3 ways: $2 a month, $5 a month, $15 a month. And that'll get you different levels of benefits as well. So you can go look that up. You can look it up right during the show. And it's not going to obscure the show. It'll just pop up a little window to the side. And you can make your decision there. I appreciate it. And so I want to say welcome to my friends who are here. Teresa Dantone, you were here pretty early. And welcome to the show. David Potter, my good friend. Friend of mine for damn near 30 years now. He and I have been friends since, I believe, 1993. And so welcome, Dave. Good to see you here. And Dave is my brother amongst other men who are brothers, but I am not a part of that brotherhood yet. And so you can all piece that together if you'd like. So I love it when Dave shows up. He kind of keeps me on my toes esoterically. And I want to say hey to Catherine Sanders. Good to see you tonight, Catherine. And who else we got? We got Doug Stack. Are you listening while working at the new business, or do you actually have an evening off? How's things going, Doug? I hope things are going well for you with the whole new business thing. Susie Q, good to see you as always. And as people filter in, if I see you, I'll say hey. If I'm too wound up and talking, I might miss you. Don't take any offense at that, because I'm doing kind of what I'm supposed to be doing by talking here. I'm going to paste in the, here's a link. If any of you want to talk about what's being talked about on the show tonight, or you want to come in and say, hey, there it is. I've just posted it into the chat room, and you can see that link will bring you right into this show. And you'll appear down below. I'll see your picture. You'll be able to hear the show there, but you won't be able to be heard until I call you into the show. And so if you want to come on and you got patience and you can sit there, come on in. Give it a shot. Those of you who are listening by other means, who are not here in the chat room, who do not show up as a name, but you're listening anyway, you are welcome to come over and join the chat room. I appreciate that. When we are live on Odyssey Radio, we have had, according to the owner of Odyssey Radio, we were doing between 5 to 6, maybe 7, sometimes on the high side, 1,000 listeners live over on Odyssey Radio. Then what you see here in the chat room is a tip of the iceberg. So make everybody welcome when they come in. If you see a new name, welcome them. And anybody who wants to come in, you're welcome to come in and get to know everybody here. So what's going on in your world tonight? I like to look at the news. I like to see what's going on. I don't always like to just jump right into the topic. Now, I will say there have been topics on this show where I can't wait to get into the topic or can't wait to get into where we left off the night before. Some of it's very heartfelt. Some of it is stuff that really speaks to me. And I can't wait to share that information with you. Now, what we're doing tonight, and have been attempting to do a couple of nights in a row, pardon my coughing, it's going to be that way tonight, is speaking about esoteric Egypt, about the origins in Egypt, the origins of mythology to cosmology, to cosmogony, as some might say. All the gods of Egypt, which we haven't even really hit on yet, because I'm building all the preamble to that, so we have an understanding of some of the mythology. I said in tonight's show, the advertisement that I put up, which I put up every night for this show, we're on Facebook and places like that, that we're going to talk about the creation of the universe, Egypt style. This is just another way to talk about cosmology, which we didn't really get to over the last couple of times we've tried it. And scholars have a real difficulty defining which ancient Egyptian beliefs are myths and which ones have something behind them. And so the basic definition of myth suggested by Egyptologists is a sacred or culturally central narrative. And so in Egypt, the narratives that are central to their culture and religion in ancient times are almost entirely about events among the gods. And the interesting thing about this is those events among the gods, you will see them written about, you will see them depicted in pictures, in carvings on temples and on statues, but you won't hear a lot of stories about the individual gods. You'll just hear snippets and events and things like that. And so we don't know a lot about them. We can piecemeal things together, and we come up with a very interesting history. By the way, hi, Elderberry. Good to see you in the chat room tonight. Saw that you came in. Welcome to the show tonight. And so what I want to do is I want to kind of pick up where we've left off, and I have so many articles and so much information that just sits open on my computer so I can keep relating back to it. I've got some pretty heavy-handed, heavy-duty stuff. Archaic Egyptian cosmology. And it's by El Sayed El Aswad. And it's an abstract. And he wrote this in 1997. Pardon me. And there's quite a bit of information here. But it's heavy duty. And so I'm going to go through some of that and kind of pick and choose so we can get a good picture of what's going on. I've got here in front of me an article about the untold story of old Egyptian cosmology. And cosmology, if you remember what cosmology is, it's really the science of the creation of the universe. And Egyptian cosmology throws in that spiritual dimension, that religious dimension, the things that really founded who the Egyptians became. And this history of these gods goes way back. Pre-dynastic. Do you know what I mean when I say pre-dynastic? For instance, when I talk about this guy sitting over my shoulder here, Senenmut. Senenmut, the man that I believe was the biblical Moses. He is a man who was the Grand Vizier to the female pharaoh, Hatshepsut. And she lived in the middle of the 18th dynasty in the New Kingdom. And she was part of the Tutmosian dynasty. So her father was Tutmosis the third. No, back that up. I'm going backwards. Tutmosis the first was her grandfather. And Ahmose the first was his father, who founded really the New Kingdom in the 18th dynasty. Coming about 100 years after them, you had the Ramessean dynasty, where you had Ramesses II, the great Ramesses II. The Ramesses who is erroneously identified as the Pharaoh of the Exodus, only because of extrapolation of information in the book of Exodus. When Exodus, now I'm going to go through this because I think it's important. This is how you distinguish sometimes myth from legend from fact. And when you've got in the biblical account in the book of Exodus, it talks about how the enslaved Israelites or Hebrews, if you will, in the land of Egypt, built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses, or Pi-Ramses as they were known. Now, we all know by history that Ramses II, Ramses the Great, the Yul Brynner character in the Charlton Heston movie, the Joel, and I can't think of his name, in the newer movie by Ridley Scott, Exodus, Gods, and Kings. That character is who is depicted as the Pharaoh of the Exodus, because they're taking Ramses II, who built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses, or Pi-Ramses. Now, what's interesting, I'm not bothering with the cough button because it's happening too much tonight, as is with last night. So you're going to have to live with it. We're just having a conversation. I'm coughing my way through it with my rough throat and my chest cold, which the cold part I think is really gone. I've just got all this rumbling and going on, and tickles my throat every now and then. So there you go. So when you've got Ramses II being identified by some in more older times, old archaeology, old anthropology, and history of Egypt, that Ramses II would have been the Pharaoh of the Exodus because of the treasure cities named in the book of Exodus, saying that the Israelites built these cities. Well, what they're missing in that is that book of Exodus is part of, now you've heard this here before, part of the Septuagint, or the Septuaginta. The Septuagint is the Greek version of the Old Testament. It was written and compiled in the language of the day that it was put together, in about the 400s BCE. You had now this is legend, was that 72 rabbis, after the Babylonian captivity, which you can read about in the Bible, And Babylon sends them all back home to Israel. You're free. You can go now. And 72 rabbis went to the Library of Alexandria. And Egypt was ruled by a Ptolemaic pharaoh at that time, Ptolemy II. And they go to Ptolemy II. They get permission with these 72 rabbis to go to the Library of Alexandria and to study out for the purpose of reconstructing the Hebrew scriptures, Hebrew history, or Israelite scriptures, Israelite history, and Jewish forms of belief. So when they went there, they reconstructed what we have now known as the Septuagint, which is in its English form, the Old Testament. So the Old Testament, as you see it now in a Bible that you might pick up, say a King James Bible or a New Revised Edition or whatever edition it might be, the Old Testament is simply, if you're reading it in English, it's the English version of the Koine Greek Septuagint. And the Septuagint was what these rabbis put together. It was a reconstruction of the Hebrew scriptures about 500 years or so after they lost them, after they were destroyed by invasion. And so they go and reconstruct. This was the value of a place like the Library of Alexandria. There were all kinds of documents there that they could draw upon, as well as, in the Jewish sense, the oral traditions of the Old Testament. So they reconstructed the Old Testament. And what's really cool to say is when you pick up a Bible today, just go get a Bible from the bookstore, look at the Old Testament, that is the Septuagint translated into English. This is what they created. Now, when it came to identifying things like the Pharaoh of the Exodus, they said that the Israelites built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses, which is true only to a point, because they would not have been in Egypt as slaves or working for the Pharaoh during the time of Ramses II. So if Ramses II built those treasure cities, what, is the Bible wrong when it says that the Hebrews built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses? No. What they built was several hundred years earlier, beneath the cities of Pithom and Ramses, they have found Avaris, a very Middle Eastern city in the Nile Delta region. And at Avaris, they found graves, they found artifacts, they found inscriptions that date to Paleo-Hebrew, some of it, Middle Eastern Hebrew culture, Canaanite culture. And so what you have in the current Bible is that the Hebrews built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses. Well, that's all they knew. That's all these rabbis knew when they were reconstructing the Old Testament scriptures. They didn't even know where Mount Sinai was. It was lost to antiquity to them. And we still don't really know where it is, although I think I know. I wrote about it. But because there's a lot of history you can trace to find it. But having said that, the Old Testament says that Avaris, or Pithom and Ramses, was built by the Hebrews. But what they actually built was the city beneath, Avaris. Now in Avaris, and we went through this several months back, I showed you pictures and reconstructions and all. Avaris is where they found the palace that they believe is the palace of the Grand Vizier, who is unnamed in those ruins, but it matches the description to a T of the palace built by none other than the biblical patriarch Joseph, who was a Grand Vizier of Egypt, probably during the Hyksos period. And they find this, and they find 13 tombs out in the courtyard, which would be for his brothers, the 12 brothers, and who he relocated to Egypt. And in one of these tombs, they find what many biblical archaeological scholars consider to be the smashed statue of Joseph. He was a Grand Vizier, and he was in a grand shrine, tomb. And there was no body there. But remember, the Hebrew scriptures say in the Old Testament that when the people left, the Exodus took place, they took with them the bones of their patriarchs, Joseph being one of them. Well, the statue is smashed, but what's interesting was the colors, the hairstyle that's on the statue, and all of this matched the color of skin that was painted for Middle Easterners. They had a Middle Eastern looking cloak, or the cloak of many colors. It was like red and black with a strip of yellow every now and then, and really fine striped garment. It was somebody that held a flail, but not the office of Pharaoh. Somebody who wore the wig, they call it the mushroom style wig that came out of the day. And so it was a very interesting find. And so what you've got here is Avaris. This is more than likely the city that was built by the Hebrews in the book of Exodus. And when the scholars updated it in the 400s BCE, reconstructing the scriptures, they called it by its current name place, Avaris, or Ramses or Pithom. And now, as Dave Potter would know, he lives here in the Twin Cities, close to the Twin Cities where I live. And St. Paul, Minnesota used to be known. If you came into St. Paul and you said the Swedes built St. Paul, I'm overgeneralizing, you'd be somewhat accurate. But what the Swedes built was not St. Paul. The Swedes built a little town called Pig's Eye. And it was a mill town on the river. And it was later renamed St. Paul for the Apostle Paul by other people further down the road. And so it's the same thing with New York. New York was originally New Amsterdam, and it was built by the Dutch. But when the British came in and took over, they renamed it New York. So nowadays, many people don't even know. And this is only a couple of hundred years later, 150 years or so later from Pig's Eye in St. Paul, that people have forgotten the original name of the town. And they go by what is current on the books. This is what you had. All right. So the reason I bring up all that as an elaborate example of what I'm talking about is that this is what you had with Egyptian myth about the gods, Egyptian myth about cosmology. You have a lot of information that is incomplete and some that has been changed over the years. Remember when we talked last week about the Ka and the Ba and the Kat and all these portions of the soul? It started with only those two parts, the Ka and the Ba. And it was as time went on, they kept adding pieces of the soul. And so this is what it became over time. This is where mythology became, or legend became mythology, but mythology was the basis of the religion and the spirituality. So all of that to say that. Iowa Axe, eat a bunch of mushrooms, put on your mushroom hat. You can be anything you want. Why, I'm the Grand Vizier. It happens. And so, hey, Siani Reese, good to see you. Morgan Snow, good to see you over there. David Castle, nice to see you in the chat room. And so let's go back a little bit more to the whole thing about the philosophy of cosmology, because we're talking about the creation of the universe in accordance to the Egyptian spirituality, the religion that they had. And cosmology, this is the whole study of the physical universe, is a science that, due to both theoretical and observational developments, has made enormous strides just in the past 100 years alone. And it began as a branch of theoretical physics through Einstein's 1917 static model of the universe. Einstein, 1917, 104 years ago. We don't think about him being that old, do we? We knew he lived a long time ago. He lived over a century ago. And he developed in its early days, particularly through the work of Lamartine in 1927. As recently as 1960, cosmology was widely regarded as a branch of philosophy, not just astronomy and science. It's been transitioned to an extremely active area of mainstream physics and astronomy, particularly due to the application to the early universe of atomic and nuclear physics. And that's on the one hand, and to a flood of data coming in from telescopes operating across the entire electromagnetic spectrum on the other hand. However, there's two main issues that make the philosophy of cosmology unlike that of any other. And we're up for our first child interruption of the night.
Can I turn off the heat? It's freezing cold.
Not too much. It's very humid outside.
Yeah, but
you may raise it 2 degrees. Put it up to 70, 71, because I think it's 69 right now in here, which is a good temperature when it's humid outside and hot. So you've got these two different issues that made the philosophy of cosmology unlike any other that in science. And the first one is the uniqueness of the universe itself. And there exists only one universe so far as we know, so there's nothing else similar to compare it with. And so the ideas of laws of the universe hardly make sense. And this means it's the historical science par excellence. It deals with only one unique object that is the only member of its class that exists physically, the universe. There's only one of them, as far as we know. And there's no non-trivial class of such objects, except in theoreticians' minds, people who theorize in string theory, as we mentioned yesterday, and other universes and so on. And it's precisely for this reason. So the issue will recur all throughout our discussion of cosmology, which isn't going to be, hopefully, too long. This is really just setting the stage kind of stuff. So cosmology, the second thing, deals with the physical situation that is the context in the large for human existence. The universe has such a nature that our life is possible. And so this means that although it's a physical science, cosmology, it's of particular importance in terms of its implications for human life. And this leads to important issues about the explanatory scope of cosmology. And we'll get to all of this. And we can get into the cosmology standard model, the space-time geometry, and I can start getting into geometry if you want, which I don't understand none of. It's like r over r in parentheses squared equals 8 pi gp, whatever gp is, in a line, and 3 minus k over r squared plus omega, or alpha, 3 with a apostrophe. I have no idea what that means. That's an isotropic form of the Raychaudhuri equation. Blah, blah, and blah, blah, and blah. It sounds like math to me, so I'm skipping it. And in case you all didn't know, math is hard, Ryan Gale. In case you all didn't know, for me, somebody who has gone through, I went through my junior year of college and didn't finish. So I didn't finish my bachelor's degree. But then I was invited to start my master's program in the seminary, and they were going to tutor me in the balance of what I needed to get my bachelor's degree as well. And then I dropped out of that too after 2 years, and I went into advertising. But with all my education, I graduated high school in 1978. But the very last math course I ever took, 9th grade algebra. 9th grade. This would have been 73, 74 school year, I think. 9th grade for me. 73, 74, if I'm not mistaken. And so somebody's got a swift mathematical mind. You can figure if I graduated in 78, May of 78, the 77, 78 school year, then it would have been 76, 77 for my junior year, 75, 76. So it was the 74, 75 school year for me. Boom. Now that we have that solved, that's the very last math course in my entire life that I ever took, was the math course in 9th grade, algebra. And lo and behold, I failed all 4 quarters of algebra. Not because I couldn't have done it if I'd put my mind to it, because I didn't care. That's the way I was. And so I failed all 4 quarters. The teacher happened to take note of the fact that I was an artist. I wouldn't have called myself an illustrator back then. I just know how to paint and stuff. And he says, I'll make you a deal. He said, this was the last week before school was out. He says, you do a portrait of me that I can hang in the back of my math classroom. And he says, and I'll make sure you don't have to take summer school and that I'll just pass you for the year because you are never going to use this shit when you grow up. And he was so right. Now at age 60, I don't think I've ever had a need for algebra or geometry. Maybe I have, and I've just figured it out in different ways. Or I've asked Siri, what is R over R squared divided by M over VX, blah, 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 blah. So I did that painting of him. He was looking like this. I had him like, ah! He was going like that. And we put that up in the back of his room. He hung it up high. It was bigger than life size of him. And it went down to about his rib cage. And he had his arms up. He was growling at you. And wait till you build the container house. That's why I'm hiring the Mexican crew, dude. Ain't going to be me doing algebra. So, anyway. Moving on. I don't even know how I got onto math. Other than say, I said we're not going to go into the equations and all that junk. Just not for what we're doing tonight. So, let's take a look at, I want to talk about the Hermopolitan Ogdoad. So he's going to talk about the Ogdoad, the creating force, according to ancient Egyptian religion and mythology. But before we get there are origins according to Egypt. The development of Egyptian myth is really difficult to trace. And Egyptologists must make educated guesses about its earliest phases, and it's based on written sources that appeared much, much later in Egyptian history. And one obvious influence on the myth is the Egyptians' natural surroundings. Each day the sun rose and set, bringing light to the land and regulating human activity. And each year the Nile flooded, the inundation. We talked about this a little bit the other night. It would renew the fertility. Once a year, the Nile would flood. And it would re-enrich the fertility of the soil. And it would allow the highly productive farming that sustained Egyptian civilization all up and down the Nile River. Thus, the Egyptians saw water and the sun as these symbols of life and thought of time as a series of natural cycles, which is kind of what time is. And so this orderly pattern was at constant risk of disruption. Usually low floods resulted in famine or drought. High floods destroyed crops and buildings. The hospitable Nile Valley was surrounded by harsh desert on both sides, populated by peoples the Egyptians regarded as uncivilized enemies of order. And for these reasons, the Egyptians saw their land as an isolated place of stability, or Mut, which we talked about last night. Mut, surrounded and endangered by chaos. And these themes, order, chaos, renewal, appear repeatedly in Egyptian religious thought. Constantly, over and over and over again. Order, chaos, renewal. There was one thing we learned about the Old Testament when studying it in Bible school and in seminary. There were repeated themes there. And it was with God's chosen people, the Jews, the Israelites, the Hebrews, the Canaanite tribe of Jacob. And that cycle was being in favor with God, sinning, falling from favor, judgment, repentance, back to living in favor with God. That was the cycle that was constantly repeated. And I think it was even simpler than that. Being right with God, sinning and falling away from God, repentance and renewal. So almost similar to what you had in the much more ancient Egyptian of order, chaos, renewal. Back to order again. So another possible source for Egyptian mythology is their ritual. And many rituals make reference to the myths that are sometimes based directly on those, and sometimes based directly on the myths. But it's difficult to determine whether a culture's myths develop before rituals or whether the rituals develop vice versa out of the mythology. So questions about this relationship between myth and ritual have spawned a whole lot of discussion among Egyptologists and scholars of comparative religions in general. And in ancient Egypt, the earliest evidence of a religious practice predates all the known written myths. Rituals early in Egyptian history included only a few motifs from myth. For these reasons, some scholars have argued that in Egypt, rituals emerged before the myths were actually written down. But because the early evidence is so sparse, the question may never be resolved for certain. Hang on a second, folks. I got to yell. Hey, Rowan, will you come and close my studio door, please? She's got all kinds of stuff playing on the TV, and it's very distracting. Will you close this, please? I'm hearing everything that's on your TV.
Did you just say YouTube?
Whatever. I said close the door.
That's Netflix.
See ya. Thank you. There you go. Mouthy kids. That's not YouTube. That's Netflix, father. It's like, whatever. Okay. She was trying to be cute. So not mouthy. So now, in private rituals, which are often referred to in Egyptology as their magics, their magical rituals, the myth and the ritual are particularly closely tied. And many of the myth-like stories that appear in the rituals texts are not even found in other sources. They're just in the ritual texts. Even the widespread motif of the goddess Isis rescuing her poisoned son Horus appears only in magical ritual text. It's not a written down story anywhere. The Egyptologist David Frankfurter, yes, Frankfurter, takes you back to your old Rocky Horror Picture days, doesn't it? Rocky Horror Picture Show days. So David Frankfurter argues that these rituals adapt basic mythic tradition to fit that specific ritual. So they created these elaborate new stories called historiolas, based on historiola. That wasn't the Egyptian word, by the way. Based on myth. And in contrast, there are other Egyptologists that said the magical texts of these magical texts, that there is not a shred of evidence that a specific kind of unorthodox mythology was coined at all for that genre. So much of Egyptian mythology consists of what? Origin myths. It would be like you could say in Judeo-Christianity, Adam and Eve being an origin myth. The creation of Eve from the taking of a rib, origin myth. The ousting from the garden after eating of the tree of the good of the knowledge of good and evil, part of Hebrew to Christian mythology. And so it's an origin myth. Whether it's true or not, it's an origin myth. And it explains the beginnings of all these various elements of the world in Egyptology, including human institutions and natural phenomenon. Kingship arises among the gods at the beginning of time and later passed to the human pharaohs. So warfare originates when humans begin fighting each other after the sun god withdraws into the sky. Myths also describe the supposed beginnings of less fundamental traditions. In a minor mythic episode, Horus. Now, Horus, you can see him all over Egypt. He's the falcon, pictured as the falcon god. Horus becomes angry with his mother Isis, cuts off her head. Isis replaces her lost head with that of a cow. Poof, I'm a cow. And this event explains why Isis was sometimes depicted with the horns of a cow as part of her headdress, the big horn with the sun disk in it. That's where that came from. So could you imagine? So her son got mad at her, cut off her head. She regenerates her own head, only uses a cow head. So there you go. So some myths may have been inspired by historical events. The unification of Egypt under the pharaohs at the end of the pre-dynastic period. You're talking about 3100 BCE. That's 5,100 years ago. Made the king the focus of Egyptian religion. And thus the ideology of kingship became an important part of mythology of ancient Egypt. And so in the wake of unification, gods that were once local patron deities gained national importance. They formed these new relationships that linked the local deities into a unified national tradition. So some of these early myths may have formed from these relationships. And Egyptian sources link the mythical strife between the gods, Horus and Set, and Horus and his mom Isis, and all of this, with a conflict between the regions of Upper and Lower Egypt, which may have happened in the late pre-dynastic era or in the early dynastic period. And we're talking 5,000 years ago. So after these early times, most of the changes to Egyptian mythology developed and adapted pre-existing concepts rather than creating new ones, although there were exceptions. So many scholars have suggested the myth of the sun god withdrawing into the sky at the end of the day, leaving humans to fight among themselves through the night, was inspired by the breakdown of royal authority and the national unity at the end of the Old Kingdom. We're talking 2686 BCE. And in the New Kingdom, this is the time in the 1500s BCE, where we have, again, Senenmut, Hatshepsut, Thutmose, Ramses. All these minor myths developed around deities like Yam and Anat, who had been adopted from Canaanite religion. Go figure that. The Exodus fits into a dynasty that had the Egyptians borrowing the names of Canaanite gods. In contrast, during the Greek and the Roman eras, which is really late, or because it's backwards, you want to say early, very late in the BCE period, 300s. So 300 BCE to 600 AD, you had minor myths that were developed in the Greco-Roman culture that had little influence on Egyptian mythology. And so this is what you had going on at the time. And this is what founded a lot of this. Hey, Michelle Canham-Free and Barbie D. Good to see you over there in the chat room. And what else we got going on in the chat room? This might be a good place to break up what I'm talking about just a little bit. Teresa's on her phone. It's got to reboot her phone. Hey. So math is hard. I saw that one. I'm going to see if there's anything really overly pertinent going on here in the chat room. By the way, if any of you want to add your 2 cents on this, on Egyptian mythology, cosmology, all of that, or just anything else, there's the link. It's in the chat room. And you can call into the show and add your 2 cents worth. So there it is. Let's see. Love that kid, said Dave Potter. You're talking about Rowan, I'm sure. Catherine said, sounds like my 6-year-old granddaughter. I tell her all the time that's a very good thing for her, that she's cute and makes me laugh. Damn straight, Catherine. Same thing here. It's a damn good thing they're cute. Sometimes they're not so cute when they come in here. And they interrupt and they want to break in and tell me that somebody won't let them have the remote for the TV in the other room. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm doing a radio show. Doesn't matter. I'm sorry, your problems do matter to me, but not during this hour. And again, pardon the coughing. I'm not going to hit the cough button every time I cough with this thing still hanging on. You know, I would do the rum and the honey and heat it all up, and I do that for my throat. Then I start drinking rum or scotch or bourbon during a show just to make my throat easy. Yeah, let's just say that I will play the inebriate by the end of the show. So there you go. What else we got in here? It's 104. It was 104 where Catherine Sanders is, now 91 at, 7:45 at night out there, California. So anyway, there we go. Getting caught up. I'm sure there's stuff way back. Yeah, there's the eat a bunch of mushrooms, Iowa X comment. Dave Potter said the drunken Irish laid it out the streets, though. Yes, the streets of St. Paul, drunken Irishman. That was a famous line of Governor Jesse Ventura when he was the governor of Minnesota. He said, yeah, the streets of St. Paul look like they were laid out by drunken Irishmen. Oh, that got a lot of people pissed off. But it also, people loved it. The Irish loved it too. We did a t-shirt at the time where he showed Celtic knotwork, and we broke it up a bit, and it's all over. We put little cars on it and stuff. And we said, City of St. Paul map, laid out by drunken Irishmen. So, there you go. Campfire Blaze is an online writing site. Oh, okay. Siani, I thought you were talking about sitting in front of a campfire. So, Ryan and Wesley, you guys had a lot to say way back, I think. And now I don't see it. I just see you being mentioned. Hey, Ryan and Wesley, somebody said. So, Wesley said, way back, ahem, I asked Jesus Christ to turn the wallets of Mecca money to dust for a moment today. Only those whom did not tell the whole vision from him. And he did. Well, good. Cool. Answered to prayer. It's better than snake biting. So, let's see. And going on and on and on and on. I'm all good. Just a wee scratchy throat. Michelle, you probably got the same scratchy throat I have. And we haven't even been making out. So I think it's going all over the Twin Cities area and these outlying areas in Wisconsin. And everybody's got this thing. Feels like my tonsils are blowing up. Then it feels like a scratch in the back of my throat. Then I get a rumbling coming up my windpipe. And you try to cough and nothing's there. And so it's dumb. Yeah, we sound the same. The samesies today. So I'm scratchy, not as bad as yesterday. And it was about this time yesterday that I signed off. I just couldn't do it anymore. So you can see I got a little more tolerance tonight with what's going on. And my eyes are tired. I don't know, look at my eyes. Just look at my eyes. This morning, I woke up at like 2 o'clock this morning. Like my body will sleep for 3 hours and wake me up. What's with that? And so I sit on the edge of the bed, and we've got one of those space age beds, with the foam and all that. And so I can sit up, I can bounce on the end of the bed, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't affect Rainey over on her end of the bed. And so I just sit there and try to think, should I be getting up or should I try to go back to sleep? Then I'll lay down to go back to sleep, and my mind is bursting, even though I know my cognitive brain is going, shut up, go back to sleep. You're going to need this sleep, or it's going to hit you later. Well, so I got up about 2:15, wandered around a bit, did some stuff, sat down on the sofa, heaped blankets and pillows around me, and fell asleep there till about 7 this morning. Woke up for a little bit, then slept until 9. So I don't know how many hours I actually got, but I got some sleep last night. Maybe that's some of it too. So that's me, Scotty, says Siani. There it is. I don't sleep, and I cannot wait till I just want to sleep at night. And so I want to get over this so I know I'm breathing fine at night. That's another thing. My brain, if I breathe shallow because of this, so I don't like the rattly, it doesn't, it's psychosomatic, not psychosomatic. What's the word I'm looking for? Mental claustrophobia I get. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't breathe. So I sit up and I breathe and fine. But, and I got a little oxygen thing, and I check it out, and oxygen's fine. Blood pressure's fine. Everything's fine. Yada, yada, yada. I'm spending more time on that than I wanted to. So, thank you. Sleep energy. And I play sleep energy music. So it's supposed to some certain level of, I don't know, G forces or G spots or G strings, whatever it is, playing, and it's supposed to put you to sleep. Fall asleep fast in 3 minutes is what they all say at the beginning. Some certain frequency and tone, and I'm sure that it works somewhere in there because I don't ever remember when I fall asleep. But the mind's going, says Siani, and I like to have to be up at like 4:30 for work. Gross. I wake up at 3:30 to 4 o'clock every day by nature. Just poof, I'm awake. If I knew I had to be somewhere every day at 4:30, what would happen? I had to oversleep every day. So it's the knowing I have nowhere I have to be except down here at my desk. So there it is. Blah, blah, blah. So let's move on. We're talking about all this stuff. I've got a definition and scope of this cosmology in front of me here. I've got content and meaning that talks about the myths and other cultures and Egyptian myth serving to justify human traditions. Let's talk about this for just a minute, the last few minutes we have tonight. Like myths in all the other cultures, Egyptian mythology did the same thing. It's to justify human traditions, to address fundamental questions about the world, such as the nature of disorder, the ultimate fate of the universe. What's entropy? Is the universe decaying? Is it going to destroy itself? The Egyptians explained these profound issues through statements about the gods. Egyptian deities represent natural phenomenon, from physical objects like the earth or the sun and the sky to abstract forces like knowledge and creativity. The actions and the interactions of the gods, the Egyptians believed, govern the behavior of all these forces and all these elements. There's a god of creativity. There's a god of fertility. There's a god of happiness, a god of knowledge, a god of the moon, a god of the star, and so on. And for the most part, the Egyptians didn't describe these mysterious processes in explicit theological writings. They didn't have theological discourses on them. Instead, all the relationships and interactions of the gods in Egypt illustrated such processes implicitly. And most of the Egyptian gods, including many of the major gods, don't have any significant roles in any mythic narrative in Egyptian literature. It's like you could say in Christianity believes Jesus was the Son of God. But imagine just stating that without him ever having a significant role in any major narrative of any kind. Just stating that he is. It's like, I just got this book. I told you last week I was going to pick this up, and it just arrived. I'm going to read this. Might talk some Jose Saramago, The Gospel According to Jesus Christ is the name of this book. And I know this is a bit of a rabbit trail, but I want to tell you what this book is about. It says on the inside flyleaf, it says, the son of Joseph and Mary was born like any other child, covered with his mother's blood. Somebody's calling me. It's David Potter. Dave, why are you calling me on my phone? He's there in the chat room. Let's answer it. Well, hey, Dave, I'm doing a radio show. He hung up. Dave, if you're in the chat room, just call the show. Here you go. Let's put that link in there again. Boom. There's the link. If you're still in there. Now, this goes on. For Jose Saramago, the life of Jesus Christ and the story of his passion are things of this earth. A child crying, a gust of wind, the caress of a woman half asleep, the bleat of a goat or the bark of a dog, a prayer uttered in the grayish morning light. The adolescent Jesus is very much an adolescent, questioning, uncompromising, troubled by the world and by his body. His mother, like any other mother, is devoted, fearful, resentful. The Holy Family has the complex frictions of any family. Yet this is not simple. Debunking realism, for Saramago also fills his pages with wisdom, vision, dream, and omen, and the defiance of the authority of God the Father, the righteous indignation on behalf of man, the anger is still not denial of him. And they call this a beautifully written, memorable work of prose by one of the finest writers in Europe today, back when this was written a couple of decades ago. So I'm looking forward to digging into this, but this is like an example. Jesus was not somebody who didn't have a narrative written about him. All kinds of narratives about him. Even in the Gospels, there are narratives of the life of Jesus. That is very unlike what we had with Egyptology and what we had with all the different gods. They're mentioned, but they don't have mythic narratives. Although all their nature and all their relationships with the other deities are often established in lists or these bare statements without narration. And so for the gods who are deeply involved in narratives, mythic events are very important expressions of their roles in the cosmos. Therefore, if only narratives are myths, mythology is a major element in Egyptian religious understanding, but not as essential as it is in many other cultures. So the true realm of the gods is mysterious. It's inaccessible to humans. Mythological stories use symbolism in Egyptology to make the events in this realm comprehensible. Not every detail of a mythic account has symbolic significance. Some images and incidents, even in religious texts, are meant simply as visual or dramatic embellishments of broader, more meaningful myths. And so this is what you've got. Wesley says, I am wickedly an evil man, but I more than know the KJV is the only Bible in English. But I more than know the KJV is the only Bible in English. Wesley, I would only politely and scholarly, academically disagree with you on that. I don't like the King James Version other than it's like reading Shakespeare. It's like saying Shakespeare is the only way to speak the English tongue. Well, maybe if we lived 400 years ago, it did. Same with the King James Bible. I see that as, and I see interpretations. You start to break down the King James Version of the Bible, and you said there were some words that were transliterated as opposed to being transposed or translated for politics of the day. I don't like a scripture that is laden with European politics or any kind of politics. That's my take on it. Love to hear your version of that. The KJV is badly translated, I think. Very badly translated. The Bible's been changed by man way too much. I know you would have to go back to, we've got codexes that go back into the late 100s BC or AD. That's about as close as you can get with some of these writings to them being the actual writings. We've got some things they say that date back into the 1st century, within 60 years of the death of Christ. So now have those things been changed? Some of them have been changed over the years. Yeah, I agree with that, and I believe that, and I know that. But I think that there are some, this is why you're always looking to get back to the earliest of texts. And this is why it's interesting to get texts like the Gospel of, some of the apocryphal Gospels that were booted out of the Bible. Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas, Gospel of Mattathias, Gospel of Mary. Some of these were kicked out. You do know that there's only 4 Gospels in the New Testament that we have now. But there were over 70 that have been discovered that are nearly 2,000 years old. So how do you determine what's real and what isn't? Some of them contradict each other. So what do you got? So there it is. I do like The Far Side, by the way. Yeah, me too. Great cartoons. I think he missed me. Mine are bad. Morgan, I'm not sure what you're trying. You try to read the King James book first. I like the King James. It's a beautiful text. It's great for quoting. So many of the verses I learned as a kid, I learned in the King James Bible. And I quote them and then sometimes mentally try to reconstruct them in modern idiom as I quote them, so people understand what it's saying. I did ask Jesus to heal one tooth in every mouth on earth, and he did. So a little clout on my, a little clout my way, maybe about the KHV. So I don't know about any of that. Wesley, you'll have to talk to us about that some more. Yeah, Teresa, this cough, I'm doing the best I can. It's better tonight than last night. So it's gradually, my doctor said, just going to get better. Just got to live with it till it's gone. It's got to almost wear itself out. So there you go. All right, guys. You know what? It's 10:03. I think I'm going to call this one quits tonight. I think we're going to be done for now. Remember, when we get back on Odyssey Radio and are going full-fledged there, we're going to have to take commercial breaks, and we're going to have very strict time limits. Doesn't mean we can't continue on in the YouTube channel. It just means I have to be set up to engineer that. And thank you, Teresa. I love you too. And so everybody, Honey and Lemon says, Steele, thank you. Good to see you, by the way. And so there we go, folks. That's all I got for tonight. And what did Ferris Bueller say at the end of the movie? He comes back out. He's in his robe and he looks at you and he goes, why are you still here? Go home. So, like we always used to say at the festival, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So, folks, thanks for being here. Tomorrow night, we're going to be back. So we're going to take roughly a 23-hour break, and we'll be back with more of this tomorrow and any other interesting thing that pops up in between. So, That's all I got. So all you guys, you know what? Live long and prosper.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.